Εξομολογήστε το Κύριο διαγραφός, αλληλούια, ότι στον αιώνα το έλεος αυτού, αλληλούια.
We don't listen to but you still cannot prove that that came from
Sorry,
How can you prove that?
Okay, so we understand, right, that we can prove things not just through empirical sciences, right?
Okay.
You agree? Do you agree with that first
Not 100%.
assumption? Okay,
Just
good.
Explain your argument.
Okay, good. I'm going to say that everything that exists has a certain potency within it, right? For example, I myself, I have the potency to move my hand to the right now, right? And it's only actually to the right once my hand is at the right. And this is what we call change, right? The actualization of a potency.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay,
I'm still
good.
waiting for the theory
Yeah,
of the proof.
well, we're going to get to the proof, right? So what we see in reality is that everything that exists in motion can either be a secondary mover or it can be a primary mover, right? A secondary mover is a thing which receives its actuality from something previous to itself, so from another potency. So for example, when your parents begat you, you received your actuality from their act of procreation, correct?
Yes.
So you would be a secondary mover, right? Now, what we are going to say is that God is what we call the primary mover. This is what Aristotle and all the philosophers call the unmoved mover, right? So what we're going to say is that in order for secondary movers to exist, there must first be a primary mover because of something we call a per se causal theory. Okay, because I'm trying to prove to you right now that a primary mover exists, which is what we call God, okay?
But
Yeah?
your argument is far too long-winded.
Okay,
and makes
I'll break it.
absolute no sense
Okay.
whatsoever.
I'll put it into
just
premises.
makes no sense.
Would you like me to put it? Would you like me to put it into premises to conclusion
It just
format?
does not make sense.
Yeah, but don't make his argument false though.
Where you saying?
You're saying it doesn't make sense, therefore it's not true. That's just fallacy.
No, I'm just saying I don't believe in a God.
Yeah,
I'm
why?
just saying you still can't.
Okay,
prove it.
okay. I will.
No matter what your
Wait.
argument is, you're just saying
Wait,
you're just
okay.
talking a lot of long words.
I'm
and
going
a
to give
lot
it
of
to you
philosophical stuff.
because the reason why I have to talk in long words is because in order for you to understand the argument, you have to understand the philosophical.
The argument's too long.
Wait.
If you're going to make an argument, your argument is very blank. You've got to make that point. You've got to make it heard.
Well, you're interrupting the point, so of course you're not going to be able to understand.
Your argument's too long.
So wait, listen to it,
I don't
and then
have the
maybe you
patience for
understand. Okay, well if you don't have the patience for that, you don't have the patience for truth. But the point at which I'm making is before I actually present the argument, there has to be a certain metaphysical buttressing to it for you to understand it. But I can just give you the syllogistic form of the argument right now, right? So premise one, some things are in motion, right? So for example, burning wood, me moving my hand to the right. Some things are in motion. Premise two, either everything is a secondary mover, A, or there is at least one primary mover, B.
No. It is a complete load of nonsense.
Okay,
You're
why?
talking
Explain
a
why.
whole load- it's just a
Explain
whole
why.
load of rubbish.
Explain why.
Yeah, it's just no. Like I
Explain
said,
why it's
you're gonna have an
nonsense.
argument. You're gonna go bang. This is my argument.
Okay,
This
so
is what I'm talking
his
about.
problem with
This
the
is what I'm
argument
trying
for
to prove.
God's existence is because he just doesn't understand it. But that's just fallacious. Just because you don't understand something doesn't mean it's not true. I don't understand quantum mechanics, but that doesn't mean... Don't run away. Don't run away, man. Come on, come back. Okay, so guys, just because the atheist left, I'm going to break down to you guys some proof for God's existence, okay? We can do this in two ways, which I prefer in the Thomistic tradition, but we're just going to talk about one way right now, which is called the argument from motion, which St. Thomas Aquinas uses as his first way to prove that a God exists. Now guys, keep in mind that when you are proving that God exists, atheists usually want empirical evidence, but we do not believe in a physical God. We do not believe that God is physical, like this floor here, like my glove, like my hand. God is an immaterial being, okay? So in order to prove a God, we're not going to appeal to empirical standards. And the way in which we can know things exist, the way we can know things outside of the empirical method It's because you can't even prove the empirical method empirically. So how do we also prove things? Through philosophy, right? We can prove things through philosophy. So in interacting with the world and perceiving it into our intellect, we can understand certain things about the natural order of things through reasoning, right? And this is where St. Thomas Aquinas, through looking at the world, and Aristotle, through looking at the world, understand an argument for God's existence called the argument from motion. Now, what is motion? Motion is the actualization of a potential. For example, if I move my hand to the left, my hand right now is potentially to the left, and now it's actually to the left. I could potentially stop speaking, and now I'm actually stopped speaking. So what motion is the actualization of a potential, right? So premise 1 is just change exists. And premise 2 is but change is the actualization of potential. And we understand that everything that exists right now has received its actuality or its existence from another thing. For example, I received my existence because my parents procreated to create me, okay? That's where I received my actuality from. So Thomas potentially existed, and then once that act happened, they actually existed. Now the question is, does a primary mover exist? Now what a primary mover is an unmoved mover. That thing which does not receive its actuality, however, it gives actuality to other things. This is what we call God. So either everything is a secondary mover, which is something which receives actuality, this is premise 3, or there is at least one primary mover, which is what we call God, which is premise 3. Okay? Now if you say that there is no primary mover, we have to account for how there are any secondary movers in the chain at all. Now St. Thomas Aquinas says that this is a per se causal series. A per se causal series is a series in which the members receive their actuality from another, however, they don't have that act of causality within themselves, right? So for example, if I move a stick and a stick moves a stone, the stick in and of itself doesn't have the ability to move the stone. It only receives that per allude when I move the stick that moves the stone. This is what we call a per se causal series. So in order for the stick to even exist, moving the stone, it's founded on a first member, which is myself, who moves the stick to move the stone, right? This is the example that St. Thomas uses. So in a per se causal series, we can't have things which exist, which receive their actuality from another, going backwards infinitely into the past, right? So just for viewers to understand, let's put it this way, right? Let's say the universe, its first cause is the Big Bang. Let's say it's one of the causes of the universe is the Big Bang. And then we're going to say, well, God was the one who caused the Big Bang. The atheist may reply, but, you know, maybe there's a Big Bang before the Big Bang. Maybe there was a cause before that, and so on. Okay, but the problem with that is that in a per se causal series, there must always be a first member, meaning that in order for the Big Bang in even to receive actuality, it must have received that first from a primary mover, which we call God, right? So the point of it is this, right? In a per se causal series, there must be a primary mover, which we call God. Now this primary mover is going to be pure actuality because it cannot receive its existence from another. This is what the atheist just ran away from, because it's clear that he's not familiar with Thomistic metaphysics and philosophy in Aquinas' first way.
He's a
okay?
Sikh. He was a Sikh, by the way.
Oh, a Sikh. Well, he was saying, prove to us that God exists, and when we give him the evidence, he doesn't want to know. He ran off. But anyways, so that's the proof for God's existence, that a primary mover exists. But there's more to this, right? Because we understand that a primary mover, according to Aristotelian philosophy, must be pure actuality in order not to receive its actuality from another. So there's no potency within this being. But if you're pure actuality, you cannot be material, you cannot be temporal, and you cannot be within the realm of space-time. Why? Because then you have the potency to change. And a purely actual being doesn't have any potency to change. He's purely actual. So we know that God is spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. We also know that this being must be perfect. Why? Because what is it to be perfect? A perfect thing is to lack all privations, okay? For example, why is a rabbit imperfect? We consider a rabbit is imperfect if it has a broken leg. It can't run away from a predator, okay? That's a privation of the rabbit's being because it's failing to actualize some potency about itself. However, consider this. A purely actual being has no privations nor any potencies. And because there's no potencies within this first being, it must be perfect because there's no lack of being able to actualize potencies. So it's a perfect immaterial, immaterial, atemporal being, right? This is what St. Thomas Aquinas calls the argument from motion. So I'm just sick and tired really of coming to the park and hearing atheists say there is no proof for God's existence. And then when we bring the proof, they just run away. They complain, the proof is too long for me. I don't want to hear that. I'm going to run away from the debate. If you want to be an actual interlocutor in the argument, just humble yourself and listen to what the other person has to say. Because Thomistically, we can prove that a God exists. We can even prove that this being has an intellect, right? This will be my final point on the proof that a God exists. Consider that God in having an intellect, what we mean for that is that God possesses the forms of things without actually becoming that thing itself, right? So for example, God possesses the forms of humanity or whatever without actually becoming that form himself because he knows it, right? God has a perfect knowledge. The way God knows things is through himself, right? God knows all things through the possession of forms without becoming them. However, if this immaterial being causes all things, according to the principle of proportionate causation, that which causes a thing possesses the form of that thing, or possesses that thing within itself, right? For example, if I were to give you £5, I must have possessed £5 in order to give it to you first, right? God, in causing creation, must have in some sense possessed it before causing it. But yet, since he's a purely actual being, he could not have been creation himself. Thus, God possesses the forms of these things without actually becoming them, and thus God has a real intellect and a will. So we understand that God exists just through Aquinas' reasoning of the argument from motion. But the gentleman over there ran away. There's lots more I'd like to say on it, but we'll just wrap it up there. I don't know if there's anything you want to close with it.
What do you think of Matt Dillahunty? Do you think you are would he be a worthy opponent for a debate?
I would love to one day be able to debate someone like Matt Dillahunty, but I think what Matt Dillahunty does fundamentally, and Bob even debated him a little bit on something, is he usually does this thing where he tries to shift the burden of proof onto someone else, right? When you're an atheist, right, what does atheist mean? It's not an agnostic. An atheist is theist. Is the negation of theist. It's not just the lack of belief in a God, it's that you do not believe there is a God. There is no God. It's the rejection of a God exists, exactly. So there is still some burden of proof, even on the atheists themselves, right? So I would ask Matt Dillahunty, if he was to debate me or something like that, what proof do you have of this? He's probably going to come up with an argument from evil or something. Then we would just come up with a theodicy to refute that.
Joseph is Jesus' father.
Alright, Thomas, thank you.
Yeah.
So anyway, tell the family about your channel, how to subscribe.
Yeah, man. I've got a YouTube channel as well called Thomas Apologia. If you guys want to subscribe and help out, I would love to see that. Subscribe, like, comment. That would be amazing.
Hit the notification button right now.
Yeah, hit the notification button right now.
That now, guys.
And we're going to be going over lots of Thomistic metaphysics, philosophy, arguments for God's existence. I haven't really covered this too in depth, so don't get onto me too much for not going into everything about the argument from motion or the De Ente or anything right now. But look, that's it. That's a wrap. Subscribe to Thomas Apologia. We out.
Anywho, God bless.
God bless.
That's it. Best. Big up.